Hello and welcome to another episode of Moonshot Nutrition. My name's Addison. Today I want to explain some of the pitfalls of a lot of the longevity studies out there and why you need to take them with a grain of salt. I'm not saying we can't learn anything from them, far from it. What instead I am saying is that people are trying to create a very myopic view of what creates longevity, and they often don't broaden their gaze to understand where it's actually coming from. Specifically, I want to talk about some of the longevity studies that have been done to prove that high starch diets like white rice and sweet potatoes in particular are great foods to use for longevity. Now, I'm not claiming that they can't be part of or even a major part of a very long and healthy life. They absolutely can. We have evidence of this all over the world. This is not news. All right, but here's where people make the mistake. We have decided to take those dietary paradigms and apply them to groups claiming that it's going to reverse all of their diseases, most of their chronic diseases. And again, there are instances where we can do this and it can work to a degree, sometimes greater than others, but there are pitfalls and there are things to remember before you go on this kind of diet. Number one, virtually all of the longevity studies, when I look at population XYZ, particularly, for instance, say Japanese, Okinawans in particular, but you can apply it to almost any long-lived population that has a high-starch diet. They have a few other things that they almost always practice as well. As an example, they have amazing social connections with each other. Okay, they form lifelong loving relationships with their family, their friends, their neighbors, their co-workers. These people live often under multi-generational roofs. And it's having that meaningful connection with one another every day, caring about the people next to you and knowing that they care about you. That has a profound impact on health and longevity, such that they've actually seen populations that we know had a bad diet, smoked too much, drank too much, didn't particularly exercise, right? Okay, so these people shouldn't be living long at all. And in fact, when they had amazing social connections, they still outlived their surrounding communities by a significant margin and had excellent longevity for the time. Malcolm Gladwell writes about this when he looked at the Italian community. I believe it was in Ohio that did this. All right, they couldn't figure it out because all they kept looking at was diet and lifestyle. They weren't looking at the social relationships and the spiritual side of life. And when they did, they realized, oh wow, these people lived a long time in spite of their poor practices because of how rich and fulfilling their spiritual life was through these social connections. A second thing to realize about these high starch diets. Number one, everybody talks about how they're low fat. Quite often, they're not nearly as low fat as you think. The reason being is that for almost all communities that live on these high starch diets, particularly sweet potatoes, by the way, but even most of the communities that eat a lot of rice, they also eat a lot of other plants with it. They almost always end up getting a relatively high fiber diet, and they have that high fiber diet pretty much their whole lives. What we know about these communities is they almost always have gut microbiomes that are beautifully designed for that diet. What that means for you and I, or I should say what that means for them, is that all that large amount of beneficial fiber will actually get processed into short-chain fatty acids in their gut, which means that where we were calling it a low-fat diet before, if we look a little closer, we'll find it's actually not as low-fat as we thought. It's just the fat's not coming directly down the pipe. It gets produced a little later on in the journey. Third thing to realize about these groups, the high-starch diets all over the world, as well as the ones that are actually, that are marketed by people like Dean Ornish and Dr. McDougall. And to be fair, they believe in these diets. They're not just pawning them off. They live it. I will grant them that. What you'll notice with these cats, and one of the reasons they work, is they are actually promoting very hard, right alongside it, all of those other aspects: healthy exercise, meditation, meaningful social interaction, and loving relationships. They're promoting these things because they too looked at the data and realized that these diets only work when you put them in the right context. Which is why when people that aren't getting that holistic approach try these diets, they so often don't see the benefit they thought they were going to, because they're just trying the diet. It's not just the diet. And don't forget, there's a pretty good chance that if you've been unhealthy for many decades, you don't have the needed gut biome to really process all of that correctly. All right? So you're literally not getting as much from your food as they are. Lastly, all of these high-starch diets that lead to excellent longevities in communities all over the world, and again, they absolutely exist, they also practice, not necessarily intentionally, but we've seen time and time again that they tend to practice basically a restricted calorie lifestyle their entire lives. They usually eat between 18 and 1900 calories a day, which is significantly below what almost everybody in the Western world is eating. It turns out, as long as there are no stark deficiencies in any given nutrients, what are actually called frank deficiencies in any given essential nutrients, people that eat a restricted calorie diet their entire lives will just have a funny tendency to live a long time. This is actually not new. We've known about this for over a decade. But again, these details get lost in people's epic journey to just try to constantly promote plant-based diets, high-starch diets, plant-based diets, high-starch diets. And while they know them and they will eventually say them, they're by far and away not the major talking points. And they need to be just as important as the diet itself. Remember, if you remove any of these elements out of this kind of diet, it has an unfortunate consequence of not working. It's certainly not working to the degree that people are made to believe that they will. I hope this helps and sheds a little bit of light on the longevity studies, and I hope it helps you find what diet works well for you. My name's Addison. This is Moonshot Nutrition. Thank you so much for watching. Make the world a better place. Bye-bye.